The quote has been repeated so many times that it has become furniture, one of those observations that everyone knows and nobody thinks about anymore because the knowing has replaced the thinking. She did everything Fred Astaire did, but backward and in high heels. It appears on posters and coffee mugs and motivational calendars, usually accompanied by a photograph of Rogers in a feathered gown, smiling the smile that the camera had been in love with since she was a teenager in Texas. What gets lost in the repetition is how precise the observation actually is. Not metaphorically precise, literally, technically precise. When Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire danced together, she was doing exactly what he was doing. Every step, every turn, every shift of weight and change of direction, but moving in the mirror image of his movement, which is geometrically and mechanically more demanding, while wearing shoes that reduced her contact with the floor to a surface approximately the size of a pencil eraser, while making it look like the easiest thing in the world. She made it look easy. This was the achievement. This was the thing that took years of work and extraordinary natural ability and a specific kind of physical intelligence that the feathered gowns and the smile obscured so completely that most people watching never understood they were watching something nearly impossible. Virginia Katharine McMath was born on July 16, 1911, in Independence, Missouri, and the independence was appropriate. She was, from the earliest age, a person who operated on her own terms, with her own engine, rather than borrowing momentum from the people around her. Her parents separated when she was an infant. Her mother, Leela, was the central figure of her childhood, a woman of formidable energy and total conviction that her daughter was destined for something extraordinary, who managed Ginger's early career with the combination of devotion and ambition that stage mothers bring to the project, and that Ginger, who was genuinely talented enough to meet whatever bar her mother set, largely validated. She acquired the nickname Ginger from a young cousin who couldn't pronounce Virginia, and the name fit in the way that good nicknames fit. It captured a quality, a warmth and a sharpness simultaneously that the formal name did not. She was performing by the time she was a teenager in vaudeville and in local theater in Texas, and when she arrived in New York in the late 1920s, the Broadway producers who saw her understood immediately that the combination of the face and the voice and the physical ease was something the stage could use. Broadway led to Hollywood, as it did for almost everyone in that era of the early talkies. Studios were desperate for performers who could handle dialogue, and Broadway was the obvious source. RKO signed her. She made films. She was good in them, better than the material often deserved, with a comic timing and a natural screen presence that directors noticed and that audiences responded to without necessarily knowing what they were responding to. She was, in the early Hollywood years, unmistakably on her way to somewhere. The question was where. The answer arrived in 1933, in a film called Flying Down to Rio, in which Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire appeared together for the first time. They were not the stars. They were the supporting players, given one dance number together as a kind of bonus feature, while the nominal leads carried the plot. The audience, watching that dance number, effectively ignored the nominal leads and demanded more of the two people the studio had considered secondary. The studio listened. It always listens when the audience speaks that clearly. What followed was 10 films across 7 years. The Gay Divorcee, Roberta, Top Hat, Follow the Fleet, Swing Time, Shall We Dance, Carefree, the story of Vernon and Irene Castle, that constitute one of the most sustained and extraordinary artistic partnerships in the history of popular entertainment. The chemistry between Rogers and Astaire was not manufactured by the publicity department, though the publicity department was happy to describe it. It was real, the specific chemistry of two people whose physical vocabularies happened to be perfectly complementary, who found in each other a partner capable of meeting them exactly where they were. Astaire was the choreographer, the innovator, the one whose perfectionism drove the rehearsal process, He was famous for demanding repetition until the number was as close to perfect as human beings could make it, which meant days and sometimes weeks of rehearsal for sequences that lasted 3 or 4 minutes on screen. Rogers matched him. She learned the choreography with a speed and a retention that Astaire's other partners did not always manage, and she brought to the execution a quality that he could not choreograph: a warmth, a sense of genuine pleasure, a way of making the audience feel that the dance was happening spontaneously, that the joy was real, that nobody had spent 3 weeks in a rehearsal studio making sure every footfall landed in exactly the right place. Her feet bled. This is not metaphor. The rehearsals were brutal enough, and the filming was brutal enough, that Rogers danced through blisters and bleeding feet with the same smile she brought to the numbers when her feet were fine. She did not complain. She did not ask for breaks that were not offered. She was a professional in the fullest sense of that word, someone who understood that the work required what the work required, and that the audience's experience of effortless joy was worth whatever it cost to produce it. She also understood something that the partnership obscured and that the studio had no particular interest in clarifying. She was not the lesser half. The partnership worked because both people were extraordinary, and the specific miracle of it was the combination. But combination is not hierarchy, and Rogers's contribution to the miracle was not subordinate to Astaire's. She had brought to the partnership something it would not have had without her, and the films would not have been what they were without her, and she knew it. She knew it because she was paying attention. She was always paying attention to the business side of the industry, to the contracts, to the way the studio valued its assets, and what that valuation meant in dollars and creative control. She negotiated her own contracts with an assertiveness that was unusual for female stars of the era, insisted on terms that protected her interests, understood the business she was in with the clarity of someone who had grown up without money and had learned that the only reliable protection against not having money was understanding how money worked. And she wanted to act, not to dance, to act in the full sense, in dramatic roles that the Rogers Astaire pictures had not required and that the studio, comfortable with the formula that was making them rich, had little incentive to provide. She pushed. She took roles outside the partnership when she could. She demonstrated, in the films she made between the dance pictures, that there was more in her than the feathered gowns suggested. Kitty Foyle in 1940 was the proof. A drama, no dancing, no Astaire, no sequins, no musical numbers, about a working-class woman navigating love and class and the specific limitations that American society placed on women who were not wealthy and not born to the right families. Rogers played it with a naturalism and an emotional directness that silenced the critics who had assumed she was primarily a dancer who happened to be charming on screen. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress. She beat, among others, Katharine Hepburn and Bette Davis, which is to say, she beat, in a single evening, 2 of the most formidable dramatic actresses of the 20th century. The award was not a courtesy or a recognition of the dance films. It was a verdict on the performance in Kitty Foyle, which was simply better than what the competition had offered that year. Astaire, characteristically gracious, said she deserved it entirely. The studio, characteristically slow, continued trying to cast her primarily in lighter material. She continued fighting for the roles she wanted, with the same patience and the same persistence that had got her through 3 weeks of rehearsal for a 4-minute dance sequence. The partnership with Astaire effectively ended after The Barclays of Broadway in 1949. They made one more film together in that year. And Rogers's post-partnership career was the career of a woman who had proved she did not need the partnership and was proving it again with each subsequent film, in case anyone had forgotten. She worked in comedy and drama with equal skill. She worked in theater, including a long-running Broadway engagement in Hello, Dolly in the 1960s, that reminded anyone who needed reminding that the stage was where she had started and that she had not lost anything in the transition to and from film. She was a devout Christian Scientist, a fact that shaped her approach to health and medicine in ways that were sometimes in tension with conventional medical thinking, and a political conservative in an industry that leaned left, positions she held with the same matter-of-fact certainty she brought to everything else, without performing them for approval or moderating them for the comfort of the room. She was married 5 times, each marriage a genuine attempt, and each divorce a genuine reckoning with the fact that the life she lived, the schedule and the demands, and the particular self-sufficiency of a woman who had been running her own engine since childhood was not easy to share. She was not bitter about the marriages. She was clear-eyed about them, in the way she was clear-eyed about everything, and she moved on from each with the forward momentum that had characterized her since the vaudeville stages of Texas. She died on April 25, 1995, in Rancho Mirage, California, at the age of 83. She had outlived Astaire by 8 years, had outlived the era of the musical by several decades, and had remained, until close to the end, entirely recognizable as the person she had always been: warm, sharp, professional, funny, possessed of a physical ease and a personal certainty that no amount of time had diminished. The quote lives on as it should. She did everything Fred Astaire did, but backward and in high heels. But the quote, as good as it is, tells only half the story. The other half is the Oscar, the contracts she negotiated, the dramatic performances nobody expected, the woman who was a partner and also always entirely her own complete thing. She did not follow, not for a single step of the whole extraordinary journey. She led, in sequins or without them, on Broadway or in Hollywood, or in the rehearsal studio at 2 in the morning with bleeding feet and a smile that made it look like dancing was the easiest thing in the world. It wasn't. She just made it look that way. And making it look that way was the whole point.